Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing an episode going over the new. Well, we're going to do a couple episodes actually, but we're going over the new America's Animal Pack. So this is a new pack that was just released this week by Frontier, and this gives us 7 animals that come from both North, Central, and South America. So really expands that new world. You know, a lot of people have been asking for a really interesting amount of species, and we do get a few species. We get a couple birds, which is awesome. We've got a monkey, a New World monkey that we've been asking for quite a while. And then we've also got a couple other really cool animals that we're going to look to. So we're going to start with 4 animals first, and then in part 2, we're going to have a look at 3 animals. So we've got some very interesting beasties coming along. So we're going to be starting off today with the American Flamingo. So let's have a look at these guys. And it's actually sped up. We'll slow it all down. So here we've got the American Flamingo. So the American Flamingo, or Phonopteris ruba, these guys are a large species of flamingo that are native to the West Indies, northern South America, including the Galapagos, and the Yucatan Peninsula. And they're closely related to the greater flamingo and the Chilean flamingo, which were all actually kind of considered the same species at one point, but now have been split into their own things. Which now considered incorrect. Also known as the Caribbean flamingo, but is also present in the Galapagos, and is the only flamingo native to North America and within the Neotropical region. So in terms of taxonomy, as I mentioned, it was already described as kind of the same sort of species as the greater flamingo, which is Roseus, which is already in the game. It was treated as a subspecies. Now they're considered their own species, and there are 2 subspecies known. There is, because their name actually means, the genus name Phonopteris means, there's a Latin word flamingo, and ruba means red, so basically this means a red flamingo. And there's ruba, which is the common one that you find around the place, and then there's the Galapagos subspecies, which is called Gonorhynchus. So in terms of their distribution, the American flamingo breeds in South America, in Ecuador, Brazil, the West Indies, and the Bahamas, and the Virgin Islands, those kind of areas, and tropical and subtropical areas of continental North America, along the northern coast of the Yucatan, and formerly actually used to breed in southern Florida in the United States. But they also are vagrant in places like Puerto Rico, Barbados, and following its expedition Florida, though some populations are now thought to be year-round residents. So the population in the Galapagos actually differs quite a bit from the Caribbean. So the Galapagos flamingos are smaller, have more sexual dimorphism, and lay smaller eggs, and sometimes treated as different subspecies, or maybe even a different species at some point. That would be interesting. So many biologists say, although flamingos are native to the tropical US, hurricanes have been known to drive them north. So there have been sightings of flamingos as far north as Kentucky, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, but they do kind of return back. But these guys tend to prefer habitats such as saline lagoons, mudflats, and shallow brackish coastal waters, and mangroves, where they can do a lot of their feeding. So in Florida, they are considered like an iconic symbol of Florida, and they were formerly resident breeding species there until the early 20th century, and have a stronger origins with the Flamingo Hotel, which is a hotel that was built in the 1920s. So part of the reason was just kind of habitat loss and exploitation kind of got rid of a lot of these specimens because they got quite low. But it's kind of on and off kind of thing. But yeah, really cool. So in terms of description, you can see they're quite a large wading bird with a reddish-pink plumage. And like all flamingos, they have a single kind of chalky white egg on a mud mound between May and August, with incubation Incubation into hatching takes about 28 to 32 days. We'll actually have a look at the baby while we talk about that. Let's have a look at you. Look at this little cutie. There's a really cute little guy. They reach, and the parents do brood their young, so they're quite good parents. They may reach sexual maturity between 3 to 6 years of age, and usually do not reproduce until they are 6 years old. Their life expectancy is 40 years old, and is actually one of the longest of any birds, so flamingos do live a very long time. So adult American flamingos are smaller on average than the greater flamingo, which is the one already in game, but they are the largest flamingo in the Americas. They measure from 120 to 145 centimeters, or 47 to 57 inches tall, And the male weighs on average 2.8 kilograms or 6 pounds, while female weighs 2.2 kilograms or 4.9 pounds. Most of its plumage is pink, which gives its earlier name as the rosy flamingo, and differentiating adults is from a much paler greater flamingo. And the wing coverts are red, and the primary and secondary feathers are black. And the bills, as you can see on the adults, will look like a pink and whitish. No, that's not what we look at. We'll have a look at the flamingo, not the barrier, but you can see it's kind of pink and whitish on the bill with a black tip, and the legs are entirely pink. And then we have this goose-like honking that you can hear here, which is quite cool. So this species has actually been well studied in captivity about its biology and its like mating behavior. So we're not going to go I'm going to delve a little bit into that. It's just because there's so much here that I could talk about, but I'm going to keep it a little bit more streamlined. But mating and bonding behaviors for this species have been extensively studied, and they are usually monogamous when selecting a nesting site and incubating and raising young, although extra pair populations. So they do cheat on each other a little bit. So males typically be the ones that initiate courtship, but the females control the process. Because if interest is mutual, the female walks by the male, and if the male's receptive, he walks up to her. And both have synchronized movements and kind of like walk in unison and have high intensity and quick pace of their heads. You know, you've kind of seen it before. That's how they kind of mate with each other, or, you know, courtship. And courtship is actually most often seen among individuals that change partners often or are promiscuous. So some birds have long-term partners, just like people, you know. Sometimes you find your one, you know, right at the first go, but sometimes you've got to go through many ones to find the right one. So depending on the bird, some have different relationships, some are long-term, some are formed like one every year, things like that. It's interesting, and there's sometimes, you know, sometimes extra like a throuple or things like that can happen, for the most part. Yeah. In terms of some really cool things is the adaptations for these guys as well. So they are adapted for shallow water environments in very interesting ways. You know, they got these long legs to help them wade and stir through the waterbed, and also got the specialized hooked beak, which is filled with small kind of not laminae is what you call them. So that allows them to filter the water for all sorts of small crustaceans and mollusks and worms and insects and just small things that they're able to ingest, very much like on a whale, which is very interesting, and they use it to obtain nutrients. And what's really interesting as well is that these guys, like a lot of species that are saltwater, you know, they take so much in water, and that takes a lot of salt, and salt is dehydrating, so never drink salt water. So how they actually manage to do that is they have because they're a saltwater bird and they ingest a lot of high salt water. They actually would lose more water and things like that. So they do have they're thought to have a salt gland as well. So the salt gland will take out the salt, and like kidneys will actually reabsorb it as well. So it's a way that they kind of deal with that high salt intake, which is quite interesting. And in terms of their kind of circulatory system, they're very similar to most birds. They have, you know, air sacs in their lungs and a four-chambered heart, and they are very efficient birds, which is quite interesting. Yeah, but in terms of migration, so like other flamingo species, they do tend to migrate. They'll migrate short distances to ensure they get enough food in their current habitat, and one habitat disturbance that have been observed to cause them to leave their feeding ground is elevated water levels. And these conditions make it difficult for them to wade, and then they kind of go out. And they're not while flights are not as long as other migratory birds, they will fly for periods without eating. So they don't migrate in the same way like godwits will migrate, but that's interesting as well. And one cool thing is, I'll add just before we go and move on to the next species, the behavior that you see them kind of standing on one leg like this, that's a way of thermoregulation. So that allows them to basically regulate their body temperature. So they lose a lot of heat through their feet. So that allows them to kind of better expose, lowers their surface area to help them keep a little bit cooler, which is interesting as well. It's also believed to disturb the water less, so they are able to better, you know, get invertebrates and things like that. But yeah, another really cool species. We'll have a look at the Zoopedia. So we kind of mentioned this. They are least concerned, so they're doing quite well. even though there's some areas where they're a little bit endangered, but you can see that's their range there, including the Galapagos. 20 to 500, so they're highly social, live in large groups, so most flamingos, they require a flock of 20 to 40 in captivity to breed. And so you can see they've got quite a high number there. I didn't want to have 500 flamingos. None mating systems monogamous, they're gregarious, they're neutral, and guests can enter the habitat, which is cool. Males, you can see a little bit bigger, as we kind of mentioned before, and they can live for 60 years, quite long-lived. Age of sexual maturity is 4 years, they have babies till they die, 1 baby per mating event. Incubation period is about 1 month, but the birth period is 11 months, and they're quite easy to breed in captivity. So other facts as well. Flamingo feathers gain their pigmentation from the bird's diet, so it's called carotenoids. So often when they eat things, they get the carotenoids, and that makes their colours brighter. And they lose their colour and turn white when molted. This trait is protected flamingos from overhunting in the Victorian area when taxidermy and feather collecting was popular. So newly hatched flamingos do not yet have the distinctive beak bend at their beak. It only develops about 2 weeks old. As part of their mating display, American flamingo cocks they cock their tails and stretch their necks to show the coloration. American flamingos have a gland at the base of their tail that secretes oils, very similar to penguins, which helps to maintain feather condition and increase the vibrancy of its plumage. And American flamingos are an important indicator of and contributes to the health of ecosystems that they live in. And their foraging oxygenates the water, so movement kind of allows more oxygen to get into the water. And their nesting structures actually create refuges for other animals. So yeah, really, really cool species, and another really important one in the ecosystem. That's a cool one there. So that's our first bird. We're going to have a look at another bird. You know, we love looking at birds. So next up, we have got the greater Rhea, not the lesser one, the greater one. And there's not much greater than this. So really, really cool species here. So the greater Rhea, or Rhea americana, these guys are a species of flightless bird native to East and South America. They're also known as the grey, common, or American Rhea, the Ima or Nadu in Portuguese and in Spanish. And they're one of the 2 species in the genus, or potentially 3, depending on who you ask, in Rhea, which is quite cool. They were first described in 1758, and they were originally described in the same genus as ostriches, so there's Struthio americanus, but now they're considered their own different species, or different genus, and that's what they're called, the Rhea. And there's about 5 different subspecies that are found across East and South America. And most of these differences are based on colouring of the throat and height, but there is kind of... I guess there's not really a solid way to identify them, so there may not even be real subspecies. It's kind of people with plumage and things like that. So in terms of their description, adults have an average weight of about 20 to 27 kilograms or 44 to 60 pounds, and often measure between 127 and 140 centimeters or 50 to 55 inches long from tail to beak, and usually stand about 1.5 meters tall or just under 5 feet. With a typical range of about 1.4 to 1.7 or 4'7" to 5'7" at the top of the head, though males are generally bigger than females. Despite delineation between the greater Rhea and the lesser Rhea, some data on body masses indicate they both average about 23 kilograms, but even at mass, partly the greater species appears larger because it's taller and longer, and where the lesser Rhea is more compact, so it doesn't look quite as, lanky and big, even though they're similar sizes. Elsewhere, the lesser Rhea has been cited to be about 12 kilograms on average, but in some areas, male greater Rheas can reach 35 kilograms on average. It's not uncommon, and even females can reach up to 30 kilograms in the right areas, with both weights being higher than lesser Rheas. So the head, as you can see, is fairly small. I think this is actually a female. Let's have a look at the male. Why not? So the lesser head and bill are very small, the latter measuring about 8 to 10 centimeters or 3 to 4 inches. The legs are long and are strong. They have 3 toes, but the hind toe is absent. And the wings of the American Rhea are actually rather long. These birds use it during running and maintain, tight turns when they're running. I want to see one stand up. There we are. I want to show you the toes, so you can see their toes. Not like ostrich. And they also use their wings for courtship displays. Greater Rheas, you can see, have quite a fluffy, tattered-looking plumage that is grey or brown with high individual variation. The head, neck, rump, and thighs are feathered, and generally males are darker than females. Even the wild, particularly in Argentina, leucistic individuals, which are kind of light albinos, and also albinos do occur, And hatchling little rays you can see over there are grey with black lengthwise stripes. So Rheas are native to Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. There's also feral populations in Germany. So in their wild population, they generally inhabit grasslands dominated by sanatail and bahana grass, as well as savanna, scrub forest, desert, pasturine, and chaparral kind of lands. Though they do prefer areas with at least a little bit of tall vegetation. They're absent in humid tropical forests from the Mata Atlantica and Planto uplands on the coast of Brazil. And they seldom go, they prefer lower elevations and seldom go above 1,200 meters above sea level. During breeding season, they tend to stay near water. So in terms of their flock behavior, they're a silent bird except for the mating season, where they make low booming noises, and they give a mouthful whistle. But during the non-breeding season, they will form flocks of between 10 to 100 birds. And while in flocks, they tend to be less vigilant, but males can be aggressive towards other males. That's another thing as well. In terms of their diet, the greater Rhea's diet is mainly foliage. I'll actually look at the female. They are herbivores. That's the male there. Pretty cool. Anyway, they particularly seeds and fruit when in season, but they'll also eat insects, scorpions, fish, small rodents, reptiles, and small birds. Favorite plants, though, are kind of things like dicots, and they will eat fruit and avocados, which can actually be seasonally important. They do not usually eat cereal grains or monocots in general. However, the leaves of particular grass species can be eaten in large quantities, and even like tubers and thistles they will eat. And like many birds that feed on tough plant matter, they will swallow pebbles and use them to help with digestion, very much like crocodiles and ostriches do. It is much attracted to sparkling objects, and sometimes do swallow metallic or glassy objects, which is quite interesting. In the fields of plants that they do not eat, they kind of like things like cereals or eucalyptus. The greater Rhea is actually quite beneficial to farmers, as they'll eat any large invertebrates they can. It includes locusts and grasshoppers and true bugs and cockroaches, and other pest animals. And juveniles, being smaller and growing, they do need more protein, so they tend to eat more of these animals. So they actually kind of let them kind of roam through their farms at that point. They also will eat Hymenoptera, so that's kind of things like bees and things like that. These can contain among them many that can give powerful stings, but birds do not care. They'll also gather at carrion to feed on the flies, so very much like generalist diet in that regard. So in terms of reproduction, we'll have a look at the cute little baby while we talk about that, because, we love a cute little baby. Look at that little guy. So after the large flocks break up into the winter, they form into 3 loose groups. So single males, flocks between 2 and 15 females, and a large flock of yearlings. With males, as winter approaches, males get more aggressive towards each other, and they start courting females by calling and raising the front of their bodies up, and keeping their necks straight and roughing their plumage. Then they will raise their wings and may run some distance like this, sometimes flapping their wings methodically and doing this to attract females. They will continue until a special female, and then they kind of, as the display continues, it gets more intense, and they start waving their heads. And once he's attracted his first mate, he will copulate with her and lead her to his nest. And when it's time for the eggs to be laid, the male will typically be on the nest already and will act aggressive when approached by the female, covering the nest with his wings, things like that. And they are polygamous, and females are serially polyandrous in practice. So that means the females move around during the breeding season, mating with the male and depositing their eggs in the male before leaving him and mating with another male. So the females go around, laying different eggs with different males, and the males kind of take charge of that. And the males will attend to the nest and take care of the incubation and hatchlings all on their own. And actually, recent evidence actually shows that males will utilize subordinate males to help incubate and protect the eggs. And if it happens, a dominant male will find a second harem and start the process again. So the nests are thus conveniently used by several females. It can contain as many as 80 eggs, laid by a dozen females. Each individual clutch numbers are somewhere between 5 to 10 eggs. However, the average clutch is about 26 eggs, and they can be laid up to about 7 different females. Rhea eggs tend to measure about 130 millimeters to 90 millimeters, or about 5 inches to 3.5 inches wide. and weigh about 600 grams, and thus about half the size of a ostrich egg. Their shells are a greenish yellow when fresh, but soon fade until a dull cream color. The nests are quite simple. It's like a simple scrape, shallow and wide scrape in the hidden location, with males dragging sticks, grass, and leaves over the area, so it resembles a fire break, which is as wide as the net can reach. The incubation period as well is about 29 to 43 days, and all the eggs hatch within 36 hours of each other, even though the nest was laid perhaps as much as 2 weeks apart. As it seems, when the first young are ready to hatch, they will start calling with a call that actually resembles like a pop bottle rocket or even a fireworks, even while still inside the egg, and so the hatchling is coordinated. And greater Rhea are half grown at about 3 months after hatching, and sexual maturity is reached about in their 14th month of life. So being actually quite big birds, they don't have too many predators. So the natural predators are typically limited to cougars, which are found in most of the areas they habitat, and is certainly their leading predator, but also jaguars, which have been found to prey on greater Rheas and hunt them in Bolivia and the Cerrado. Feral dogs also kill younger birds, and crested caracaras eat hatchlings. Armadillos will sometimes eat the eggs as well, but for the most part, they're actually mostly predator-free. And captive bull brayers exhibit actually significant ecological naivetism. So this fearlessness actually makes them highly vulnerable to predators when released after part of reproduction projects. So they tend to use classical conditioning to try and help them in the wild to teach them to avoid predators. But in terms of their status or conservation status, the greater Rhea is considered near threatened by the OCN, where it has a decreasing range of about 6,540,000 square kilometers, and it's said to be declining due to increased hunting, the conversion of its habitat into grasslands as well. Farmers consider the Rheas pests because they will eat cabbages and bok choy and things like that, and that's not good. And but in terms of their relationship with humans in general, ancient humans used to hunt the Rheas and believed to have hunted them as early as the Holocene, and the species is actually farmed in Europe and North America as in a similar fashion to other ratites, and they're used for their meats and eggs. But Rhea oil is also used in cosmetics and soaps, and the leather that they make is traded in quantity. And males, as I mentioned, they're very territorial during the breeding season, and the infants have high mortality rate in typical confinement farming situations, but under optimum free-range conditions, they can reach adult size in about 5 months. So, kind of power feed them. But yeah, really, really cool. Very awesome species. We'll now have a look at their zoopedia. So the greater Rhea. We don't know their population, of course, but they're believed to be declining. So quite a cool big bird. You can see their range there. It kind of goes through, 3 to 13, so they do have a bit of a flock. Bachelor groups 3 to 6, and females have a little bit bigger. Male competition during breeding season, that's a good one. Promiscuous, yep, that makes sense. Gregarious, so all mature offspring are tolerated. They are confident, and guests will flee from them, so it can be a bit of a handful. So in terms of size, as I mentioned, males are a little bit bigger, about 1.5 meters tall, compared to 1.4 meters tall, and you can see generally a little bit larger the males are, but you can go in that regard. In terms of age of sexual maturity, 2 years. They get sterile, they have babies till they die. They have 1 to 4 babies per mating event, and they generally have an incubation period of a month, which makes sense. Interbirth period's about 11 months, and they're quite easy to breed in captivity. So they are the largest species of bird in the Americas, that's true. There's a population of 100 greater Rheas in Germany, established from several breeding pairs that escaped from a farm in 2000, that's true. We already mentioned that one. The greater Rhea runs quickly in a zigzag, using its wings as rudders to allow quick turns. And greater Rhea males do all the parental care for eggs and chicks. The females do not care for the nest after laying eggs, so that's true as well. Yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see greater Rhea, not much greater than a Rhea. Yeah, really, really cool species. I love seeing them around. So yeah, I'm quite happy to see this one. Next up, we're going to North America this time. We're going to have a look at some bighorn sheep. So that's another cool species everyone's kind of been wanting for a while. So we'll have a look at you there, big boy. So this is the bighorn sheep. So the bighorn sheep is a species of sheep native to North America. It is named for their large horns, hence bighorn sheep. And they have a pair of horns that typically weighs up to 14 kilograms. And the sheep itself can weigh up to about 143 kilograms. And recent genetic studies suggest that there's 3 different species or subspecies of bighorn sheep, with one of them being endangered. We'll get into that. So these sheep originally crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia, and the population of North America kind of peaked in the millions, and they're quite popular in the mythology of Native Americans, where their population has crashed due to diseases brought by European livestock and overhunting, as we'll get into. So there is kind of 2 species of mountain sheep in North America. There's the Dall sheep that was already at the beginning of the game, the Arctic pack, and then you've got the American bighorn sheep. So wild sheep crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia into Alaska during the Pleistocene, estimated about 750,000 years ago, and subsequently spread as far south as northwestern Mexico, and kind of, diverged. So divergence of their closest Asian ancestor, the snow sheep, occurred about 600,000 years ago. And in North America, they divided into the Dall sheep, which it's more northerly, lives in Alaska and northwestern Canada. But the bighorn sheep lives a lot more south, found in ranges from southwestern Canada to Mexico. However, the status of the species is actually questionable, as they kind of hybridize quite a bit. So basically, if you're north, it's a Dall sheep. If you're south, it's a bighorn, pretty much. And there are a lot of former subspecies described, but a lot of them have kind of been lumped into the 3 modern subspecies, which have actually been proved by genetics. So there's the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, which is the type subspecies that lives in the Rocky Mountains in the northwestern United States. The Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep, which is also formerly known as the California bighorn sheep. And there's genetically distinct subspecies that live around the California coastal range, also the Sierra Nevada as well. And the desert bighorn, that's another cool one. So that's found in southwestern United States down to Mexico as well. But that's quite cool. But in terms of the description, you can see the males have these quite large curved horns that owned by the rams. And even females do have horns, but they tend to be a lot straighter. So we'll have a look at the male a lot. We'll have a look at the female, because she's even got horns. So they range in colour from a light brown to greyish to dark chocolate brown, with a white rump and lining on their backs on all 4s, all 4 legs. Males typically weigh between 58 and 143 kilograms, or 128 to 315 pounds, and are 90 to 105 centimeters, or about 35 to 41 inches at the shoulder, and about 1.6 to 1.85, or 60 to 73 inches long from nose to tail. Females, in their measurements, they typically range between 34 and 91 kilograms, about 75 to 201 pounds. That's it. 75 to 90 centimeters, or about 30 to 35 inches tall, and about 128 to 158, or 50 to 26 inches as well, as long. Males, you can see, have those large horn cores and enlarged caudal and frontal sinuses, and these are adaptations to actually protect the brain from when they clash. And bighorn sheep as well have a preorbital gland on the anterior corner of their eye, and also glands on their groin and a pineal gland on each foot, with these secretions actually being used to kind of communicate. So bighorns from the Rocky Mountains are also relatively large, with males even being occasionally getting over 500 pounds or 350 kilos, and females getting over 90 kilos. So there's some areas where there's quite big sheep, but it's interesting as well. So the Rocky Mountain and Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep typically occur in cooler mountain areas. In contrast, the desert bighorn sheep kind of is found in hot desert ecosystems. So they typically live in alpine meadows, grassy mountain slopes, and foothills as well. And since bighorn sheep cannot move through deep snow, they prefer drier slopes. They're also highly susceptible to diseases carried by domestic goats, such as scabies and pneumonia. And other mortalities can be things like falling off cliffs. And they're actually well adapted to climbing in steep terrain, which protects them from predators. But predation typically occurs with lambs, which are hunted by coyotes, bobcats, grey foxes, wolverines, jaguars, ocelots, lynxes, and golden eagles. Though bighorn sheep of all ages are threatened by black bears, grizzly bears, wolves, and mountain lions. And they use their agility to try to avoid predation from these guys. They also, fire suppression techniques actually visits visibility through scrubland, which increases cover rates for mountain lions. So good fire regimes actually help the species because that provides less cover for lions to hide in and give a better chance to see them. And bighorn sheep are actually considered quite a good indicator for the health of the land because the species is sensitive to many human-induced environmental problems. So to tell of, they're kind of good indicator species. And because of their aesthetic value, you can see these big boys look really, really pretty. So they are kind of valued for game animals as well by hunters. And they graze on grass and browse on shrubs, particularly in the fall and winter, and they will seek minerals from salt licks. Females tend to forage and walk, possibly to avoid predators and protect lambs, while males tend to eat and then rest and ruminate, which leads to more effective digestion and greater increase in body size. So in terms of their social structure, they live in large herds, but typically follow a single leader ram. Unlike the mouflon, they have a strict dominance hierarchy. During the mating season or the rut, the ram attempts to establish a dominance hierarchy to determine access to use for mating. So during the pre-rut period, most of the charismatic horn crashing occurs between the rams, where they're going to go up to each other and they walk up and then turn face to face before they lunge into each other with those headbutts, which is quite cool. And females actually may fight for a high social status as well. And typically they kind of integrated this hierarchy at about 1 to 2 years of age. Rocky Mountain Bighorns employ at least 3 different courting strategies. So the most common and successful one is where the ram follows the ewe in estrus. Tending takes considerable strength and vigilance, and ewes are most receptive with 2 tending males. Another tactic is coursing, where rams will fight for another tended ewe, and ewes actually tend to avoid coursing males, so the strategy is ineffective. Also, they apply access to tending areas so they can even before she enters estrus. So in terms of the little babies and the reproduction, let's see if we can find a little kid. There's a little kid there. Little guy. So in terms of these guys, they have a 6-month gestation period. And in temperate climates, the peak of the rut occurs in November, with 1 or really 2 lambs being born in May. Most births occur in the first 2 weeks of the lambing period, and pregnant ewes of the Rocky Mountains migrate to alpine areas in the spring, giving birth in areas that are safe for protection, but away from areas with quality foliage. Lambs born early in the season are more likely to survive than lambs born later, with lambs born late may not have access to sufficient milk, as their mothers were lactating at a time when food quality is higher. Newborn lambs weigh between 3.6 to 4.5 kilograms, or 8 to 10 pounds, and can walk within hours. The lambs are then weaned when they reach about 4 to 6 months, and the lifespan of ewes is about 10 to 14 years, while rams live about 9 to 12. So in terms of their conservation, we'll talk about that. They are an animal that has kind of declined a bit. We'll have a look at these guys and talk about them. So bighorn sheep were widespread across the western US and Canada and northern Mexico 200 years ago. Their population was estimated to be between 150,000 to 200,000, though unregulated hunting, habitat destruction, overgrazing, and diseases contrasted from domestic livestock as a kind of cause them to decline. But there have been a lot of campaigns to save the bighorn sheep. So they've kind of really helped them setting up reserves and things like that, and part of breeding things and things as well. However, state and federal agencies have actively pursued, the restoration of bighorns. However, it may have met with some limited success, and most of the historical range remains unoccupied. And hunting is allowed, but it is very heavily regulated, which is one of the good things. But they are still technically considered at least concerned, because there's still quite a lot of them left. But in culture, they are considered quite admired. They were all also hunted by Native Americans for their meat as well, and they also serve as ecotourism. A lot of people want to go see the bighorns. The Rocky Mountain sheep is the provincial mammal of Alberta, and the desert bighorn sheep is the state mammal of Nevada, which is quite cool as well. So they are quite important in culture, so they're a species that everyone kind of loves. Yeah, let's have a little looky-loo. No, that's a bit of a teaser for later, but we'll have a look at the superior. So you can see the wild population estimated about 67,000. So they're considered least concerned, but they're nowhere near as much as there were back in the day. And to kind of talk about them here. So natural habitat, you can see how far they range. So Dall sheep lives up here, and then typically bighorns live down south. In terms of group, 3 to 10. So, a male and two girls. Kind of the same there. Males fight for right to mate. Female hierarchy based on age. They are polygamous. Matrilineal, so they're kind of mature males related to alpha become outsiders. They are confident and guests will flee from them. Size, they get about 1 meter at the shoulder for males, 85 centimeters for females. 12 years of age, and then 75 to 50 kilograms in that kind of area. Age of sexual maturity is about 2 years old. They have babies till they die. They have 1 to 2 kids per mating event. Duration period is about 6 months, seems about right. And the birth period is about 6 months as well, and they're quite easy to breed and get dirty. So let's have a look at some facts. Bighorn sheep have double-layered skulls that protect their brains when clashing horns with rivals and helps them bear the weight of their large horns. Already kind of mentioned that one there. During the mating season, male conflicts may last as longer than 24 hours, with males clashing horns 5 times an hour until one concedes. Homosexual behaviour has been observed in bighorn sheep and bachelor groups, and they're excellent climbers and have hooves adapted for gripping steep, smooth surfaces. So very similar to other species as well. Yeah, that's quite cool. Yeah, another bighorn sheep, so that's another cool species we get to have. And last but certainly not least for part 1, we have got a monkey. We know we love a monkey. We have got the white-faced Saki. Let's take a look at this guy. So let's have a look at the monkey, the monk. So the white-faced Saki is a species of New World Saki monkey. And they're a small-bodied neotropical primate that lives in Brazil, French Guiana, Suriname, and Venezuela. So this is a species that feeds mostly on fruits, nuts, and seeds. And they're a boreal species, and they actually brachiate, which is quite interesting. They're also terrestrial when foraging. Typical life expectancy is about 14 years in natural habitat, but captive individuals have lived up to about 36. And they are active during the day and sleep in high elevated areas in trees. And they may take shelter, and many lives in shelter from weather and flying predators. And it was formerly a subspecies described, but are now considered their own species. So we'll have a look at reproduction first, because that's how the thing is organized. Let's have a look at this cute little baby. So pairs of white-faced Saki only breed once a year, but do not breed seasonally. Estimated typical birthing seasons are typically from August to September. White-faced Sakis have been observed breeding in March, April, and June. So breeding is typically not private and sometimes even done with other group members watching. Regardless of how reproduction occurs, the white-faced Saki gives birth to only 1 offspring at a time. Peak birth months are typically between February and June, and in captivity, female white Sakis actually experience ovarian cycles of approximately 14 days, and a gestational period of about 20 to 21 weeks. Following birth, the mother undergoes a period of lactationally induced infertility that lasts about 23 weeks, and once an infant is born, the father spends a great deal of time around it and its mother, likely to protect the two from predators. During this time, the mother grooms and takes care of the offspring until it becomes independent. Male parental care, on the other hand, does not exist at all. Once it is independent, the offspring usually stays and contributes to some member of the group it was born into. Mature females are still housed by their parents and do not participate in reproduction. White-faced Saki practice both monogamy and polygamy, and are defensive when it comes to keeping other groups away from their females. As such, there's only 2 objectives in the white-faced Saki mating system, so exclude outsider groups from accessing their females and reduce competition within the group over females. So you can see, we already see that there is some quite strong sexual dimorphism in this species. So you can see these are the females here. So females tend to have shorter hair than the males, and with a brownish-grey fur and white or pale brown stripes on the corners of their nose and mouth. But you can see the males, on the other hand, very different colours there. So the males, on the other hand, have blacker fur with a reddish-white forehead, face, and throat, with their faces being much wider than those of the females. Though in size, there's little to no difference in size between female and male Sakis. In the species, both genders are relatively small-bodied, with males weighing about 1.73 kilograms and females weighing about 1.52 kilograms, or about 3.8 and 3 pounds respectively. In terms of hierarchy, males are clearly favoured within the group and in social bonds. Typically, the oldest male is the most dominant in the group, with young Sakis often identified as females because of their sometimes grizzled dorsal hair and orange bellies. It is approximately 2 months old when they begin to show these differences in their coloration as they grow. So in terms of their behaviour and social bonds, they are typically quite shy, but they are most active during the early morning and mid-afternoon, and can be found in the understory and lower canopies of rainforests. Males are usually more active than females, and at night the white-faced Saki Typically migrates up hills to higher altitudes and sleeps near the tops of the trees. It typically changes its sleeping site every night, except on rare occasions, and they do separate themselves into small family-like groups. A South American study actually showed that the groups range from 2 to 12 members, with higher numbers typically occurring in Guyana. Most widespread observations show they travel in groups of about 2 to 3, which is usually have bonded parents and their offspring. It is believed they, as we mentioned before, practice both monogamy and polygamy. It's uncertain which one has partaked more, but single male and single female white-faced Saki bonds are among the strongest bonds in the group, and they typically strengthen them through grooming. However, only females groom males, but the male does not reciprocate. This practice occurs less frequently after an infant is born, and as a child becomes more independent, the father and the mother spend less time together, and the mother grooms the father less. Male-male bonds become white-faced Saki are the weakest. When polygamy is practiced within groups, competition between members arises, and sometimes they may even erupt at one another when they're trying to breed. These conflicts occur within groups, and nowhere near as intense in conflicts of two different groups. White-faced Sakis are typically peaceful in the presence of other species, but this is the presence of a different group of white Sakis. They can get quite hostile, which is interesting as well. So they actually will kind of stand off at each other and become very aggressive, and they'll chase each other from tree to tree. That actually has caused the deaths of some Sakis as they fall out of trees. The reason for the hostility is because usually of access to females. So white-faced Sakis want to keep access to the females exclusively to their group. However, altercation between groups can occur over resources and food as well. And even though these groups are typically hostile to white-faced Sakis and the groups, they do sometimes allow immigrants to become part of their group, which is interesting as well. In terms of locomotion, the white-faced Saki differs from many other primates, even though it's close relative, that is predominantly a leaper. It is actually considered one of the greatest leapers out of all the neotropical primates. They're so good at leaping, it was given the name Monovolda, which is flying monkey, and its skeleton shows many morphologies associated with leaping. It has long high limbs that allows it to propel itself, and between leaps they use their average and forelimbs to make a series of rapid hops that allow them to pull together. They are considered to be awkward quadrupedal walkers and runners, and they actually really use any subsensory behavior like other primates, and usually sleep or eats in a sleeping or clinging position, a seated or clinging position. Leaping accounts for 70% of their locomotion, with quadrupedal walking and running is 25%, and climbing is accounted for 5%. So in terms of their diet, they primarily travel about 0.5 to 1.25 miles, or between 0.8 to 2 kilometers, looking for food. They are a mixed diet, so they primarily eat fruits, leaves, seeds, insects, honey, and small animals. They are primarily seed predators, so they eat about 60% of their diet is seeds. As such, the average lipid intake is actually quite high compared to other fruit-eating animals, which is interesting as well. But that means they have a lower protein intake. They have specialized dental anatomy, including large canines that allow them to break into hard and protected fruits. And they normally consume the seeds of unripe or immature plants. And while they do not eat the flesh of fruit, it comes from ripe, mature fruit. After seeds, young leaves are the next most common resource. In an Venezuelan study, they placed two groups of leaves, one had mature and one had mature leaves. And in the study, it observed they only ate the young leaves and really did not eat the groups of mature leaves, which is interesting as well. It's also established that these guys do like to hunt insects more regularly during the wet season in the rainforest. And on other occasions, they've been observed crawling into hollow positions in trees and actually eating bats. And this is typically mostly protein from that. They get them from immature fruit seeds, and they get their lipids from ripe fruits. You also eat a variety of different drupes that give them, simple sugars and fibers as well. But in terms of predation, they do make alarm calls that can be observed to last between 1.2 to 88 minutes, and a sound of the initial white-faced Saki is continually echoed to others to spread the warning. So they will puff off their bodies and stomp their feet on the ground to attempt to intimidate the threat. They are a small primate and dwell in the branches of trees, so one of the biggest predators are large birds such as hawks, vultures, and harpy eagles. In the face of danger, they'll emit a warning call or freeze if the canopy in an attempt to move down is out of sight. The predator's response to the white-faced Saki is based on what they're facing. If it's a smaller threat that can be easily overpowered, they will mob it and scare the predator away. But if the threat is larger, like an eagle, they will refrain from warning calls and descend out of sight. in the lower canopy. But other predators that they'll have are called taras, jaguars, pumas, green anacondas, ocelots, red-tailed boas, and even large mustelids, which are usually threats to the elderly. But yeah, another really cool species. I love seeing the Saki, and I know a lot of people are going to love seeing these monkeys. But yeah, I think this is it for part 1. Oh, wait, no, we've got to have a look at the Zoopedia. Then we'll go out and I'll carry on with that. See least concern, see their range there. So groups 2 to 12, yeah, makes sense. That's kind of the maximum size of their groups based on studies. Dominance, none. Monogamous, possibly promiscuous, yeah, it just depends. Gregarious, all mature offspring are tolerated in the group. They are shy and guests can enter their habitat. Size, very similar in size, in terms of length, 36 centimeters for males and females. Live for about 25 years. Males are a little bit bigger. In terms of sexual maturity, 3 years. They have babies. Their sterility is about 25 years, basically when they die. Number of mating events is 1. Gestation period is about 5 months, and death period is 13 months, and they're easy to breed in captivity. So white-faced sakis are popular and charismatic animals. They also makes them vulnerable to capture for the illicit pet trade. True as well. White-faced sakis typically eat nuts, and they have specially adapted canine teeth that allow them to break open hard shells and seeds of nuts. They also duet together to improve groups' cohesion and social bond. That's a true one as well. Juvenile white-faced sakis often stay with their parents and help raise their siblings, teaching them parental care ahead of having their own offspring. So that's quite important as well. And the golden-faced saki was considered a subspecies of the white-faced saki until recently, and the species only split in 2014. And they don't have anyone they like to share their habitats with. But yeah, that's another really cool species. Definitely a big fan of this pack so far. Some really cool animals we get to talk about. So this will be part 1. Part 2, we're going to be talking about the rest of the pack. We've got 3 more animals, and they're kind of a bit more involved. So I hope you guys will enjoy that. So, yeah, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always forget the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.